Good morning, class. My name is Enoch Banda. I welcome you all to this class, and the subject, the course we'll be doing in this class is international business. International business. International business consists of transactions that are carried out across national borders to satisfy the objectives of individuals, companies, and organizations. In this course, you need to think broad, you need to think open, you need to think wide, because you're not only dealing with one entity, but you're dealing with a wider entity, and that is affairs that are happening in other countries as well. From the definition of international business, we see that international business involves an interaction of transactions between borders of countries. It can be between one country and another, or it can be a business that involves a lot of countries for it to excel. Let's see some examples of international business. We've got Citibank, Walmart, McDonald's. These are some examples of international business. For example, when you look at local traders, they also perform international business. Some women engage themselves into transactions like moving from one country to another. In those transactions, for example, women who are trading in Zambia, they might go to a place or another country like Zimbabwe, and from that place, they'll be able to get goods which they will in turn come back with them, and then through that transaction, they carry out an activity that is referred to as international business. In every business, there are profits, challenges. There are also things that you can discover along the way as you're carrying out those businesses. For example, on this slide, we see that at least every business is going to be faced with two uncontrollable uncertainties. And then we look at the environments which a business might operate in. A business can operate in three types of environments. We've got the domestic environment, the foreign environment, and the international environment. In these types of environments, we see that a business can be faced with two uncontrollable uncertainties. Let's look at the definition of domestic environment. Domestic environment, this refers to all uncontrollable forces originating in the home country that surround and influence the firm's life and development. This simply means that, for example, if I told you start a business today in Zambia, the domestic environment is that home country where you started that business in. Some uncontrollable forces that you can face will be the exchange rates and also the political structure that might be enforced by the current government. Moving on to foreign environment. This refers to all uncontrollable forces originating outside the home country that surround and influence the firm. So these are factors that are coming from countries that are not part of the home country where the business originated from. These factors can be language and also international decisions and fluctuations of the currencies. That is what the foreign environment comprises of. The third one being international environment. This looks at the interaction between domestic and foreign environmental forces or between sets of foreign environments. How will the domestic country and the foreign country relate at the end of the day, in as much as they are carrying out their international business? Looking at this diagram, it gives an example of the forces, the uncertainties that the business faces. From the top, we've got the foreign environment. Some uncertainties it can face are political or legal forces. Apart from that, it can also face economic forces. Moving down, we've got the domestic environment. And then in the domestic environment, we see uncertainties that the business can face to be political as well and legal forces. But not only that, the competitive structure of the market setup where a firm is. There are some products in which a firm can have a monopoly over every entire business that is running. And then there are some products where a firm cannot decide on the price that it has to set for its product. That is the competitive structure that a firm is going to face in the domestic environment. We also look at geography, infrastructure, economic climate, structure, distribution, level of technology. These factors as well can be uncertainties that a firm can face in these types of environments that we have captured. With the fast growing population, a firm that is running on the same technology over time might face challenges if at all the population, the demand of the people is not being met by the supply that the firm can produce. So these are the uncertainties that a firm can face either in the domestic environment, international environment, or the foreign environment. What are some factors that lead to international business? Increase and expansion of technology, liberalization of cross-border trade and resource movements, development of services that support international business, growing consumer pressures, increased global competition, changing political situations, expanded cross-national cooperations. We can see that these factors are some of the factors that lead a firm to go international. Let's look at liberalization of cross-border trade and resource movements. Liberalization of cross-border trade. For example, if at all Zambia and Zimbabwe had trade partnership, and then the terms of trade that these two countries were experiencing were very stiff, in that they were having high tariffs, um, strict import quotas, etc. Those, and then at the end of the day, we see a situation where these trade policies are liberalized, in that we experience an environment where free trade at the end of the day is the key for both countries. We are going to see most domestic businesses cross borders from one country to another. That is what we learn from liberalization of cross-border trade. People will be able to export and import goods and services freely without experiencing costs that can be of a negative adverse to them, without experiencing costs that can hinder them from expanding, without experiencing costs that can give them second thoughts about venturing into a business that they desire to do. And then development of services that support international business. With the advancements of technology, we have seen over the years that people had to travel from one country through overseas just for them to get the resources that they desired at the end of the day. But with this current development, we see that people are able to make transactions and be able to get each and everything they want just by carrying out transactions using mobile phones. They can carry out transactions using mobile phones by linking their bank accounts and other money accounting systems that they have. Growing consumer pressures. Growing consumer pressures. A country might not have all the resources that it needs to provide for the consumers. And a business in a given country is operating, producing, and is experiencing supply and demand. What do we mean by growing consumer pressures? For example, if at all a firm was able to produce 10 units of bread, if at all it was able to produce 10 units of bread for a population of 10, and then the consumers increase from a total population of 10 to 15, the firm should be able to adjust to meet the demands of the consumers by also increasing in the supply. Increased global competition. If a firm that is experiencing increased global competition will decide to go international, because in the domestic country, it has been experiencing excessive competition that it becomes so stiff for it to make normal profits as before. It will go international to venture into places where it can make better and profits that are going to be realized as objectives that it needed as before. changing political situations. For example, during the ban of Coca-Cola in India, we see that the ban of Coca-Cola in India was because of the political influence that the current government had on that beverage drink. Hence, we can conclude to say that the political policies that a given government imposes on certain products might shape the firm's decision from moving from one country and deciding to go international. And then the last point that we have on factors that lead to international business, we've got expanded cross-national corporations. Expanded cross-national corporations, these are corporations, for example, we've got the SADC, which is a corporation in the southern region of Africa. These corporations involve countries in coming up together for a common benefit. And at the end of the day, we've got such entities, which are business entities, which are called multinational enterprise. These are the factors that lead to international business. These are factors that will make a firm or any business to decide to go international. Why do firms internationalize? Firms internationalize to seek for growth through market diversification. Firms internationalize because they want to earn higher profit margins. Firms, they also internationalize in order to gain new ideas about products, services, and business methods. To better serve customers that have relocated abroad. Be closer to supply sources, benefit from global sourcing advantages, or gain flexibility in the sourcing of products. These are the reasons why firms go international. Seeking opportunities for growth through market diversification. We see that if at all a business is specialized in one market area, and then that market area has been struck badly by a negative reason, we realize that at the end of the day, that firm will struggle to grow because it only concentrated in one market place. But for a firm that has diversified, because diversification means being able to set opportunities across a given circumference. Hence, if at all a firm is able to operate in area A, area B, area C, and area D, we realize that if at all area A is affected, that firm will be able to operate because area B, area C hasn't been affected. It is going to grow further because these other areas have not been affected. That is what we learn from diversification of markets and higher profit margins. This is a point that simply means that if at all a firm is operating in country A and that country has become very competitive, that firm cannot make profit margins as it made when it was growing. A firm might decide to expand its businesses to country. It might decide to expand its businesses to country B, country C, where it can find cheaper labor, for example. By doing so, that firm is going to experience less production costs. And if at all a firm is able to experience less production costs, that firm will be able to realize higher profit margins compared to the way it did before. Gain new ideas about products, services, and business methods. There's a point which says that for you to learn new ideas, you do not have to be restricted to one thing in life. By reading, we get to know more. By moving, we get to experience more. That is why if a firm is operating in Zambia and decides to go international, establishes itself in another country, in that country it will be able to experience, it will be able to learn new ideas, new production methods, and new services on how products have to be managed. That is what we gain by being able to go international. Point number 4, why firms internationalize. Better serve customers that have relocated abroad. This will always ensure that a firm does not lose its market, it does not lose its customers. This is because it will be able to provide the same services to those people who have relocated, the same products that it provided before, it will be able to provide to them at their doorstep. Point number 5, why firms go international. To be closer to supply sources, benefit from global sourcing advantages, or gain flexibility in the sourcing of products. A firm might be importing a raw material of its production, or in its production chain, there's a stage where it needs components, and then those components that it needs are being imported from another country. That firm could decide to reduce costs of the supply sources by establishing itself in that country where it gets those raw materials from. And by doing so, that firm will reduce the supply costs sources, and then it's going to benefit from the global market. Because in that new setup where it's established itself, it will be able to venture into a reduced production chain. That is the reasoning that is behind point number 5, which is be closer to supply sources, benefit from global sourcing advantages, or gain flexibility in the sourcing of products. Let's move on to our next slide. Why do firms internationalize? We continue. Gain access to lower cost or better value factors of production. Number 7, develop economies of scale in sourcing, production, marketing, regulation, and development. Confront international competitors more effectively or thwart the growth of competition in the home market. Invest in potentially rewarding relationship with foreign partners. So we go to the reasoning behind point number 6. Gain access to lower cost or better value factors of production. We see in most situations an example that we can give for a country that takes advantage of lower cost of production. That country is India. We've seen that most businessmen, that country is China, pardon me. We see that most businessmen and women from China have established their companies, their businesses, their firms in Africa. This is because in these places, they are able to have lower costs of production. Why do they have lower costs of production? They are able to employ people who've got less labor value, people who've got less costs in employing them. That is why they venture into places like Africa. Develop economies of scale in sourcing, production, marketing. The reasoning behind this point is when a firm goes international, it realizes bigger profit margins, larger profit margins compared to before. In doing so, this firm will be able to expand, it will be able to create a bigger production area compared to the way it started. Point number 8, confront international competitors more effectively. When a firm is operating in its domestic country, the country where it started from, as it grows, it experiences competitors. This is competition from firms or businesses which are carrying out the same production of a given product. In these productions, if at all the competition increases, firms become carriers of a given price. They do not have the ability to set a price when the competition is high. A given price is taken by any firm in the production of that product. If a firm decides to lower the price of that product, that firm is not going to do any good to itself because it is going to realize losses at the end of the day in an expense to save a bigger demand of customers. When a firm decides to increase its price, that firm is going to lose all the customers that it decided to. It's going to lose all the customers that it was saving because those customers can go to another firm that will be able to provide the same product at a cheaper price. Hence, for this reason, firms won't be able to change the price, but they have options at their disposal. They can decide to go international or to venture into other locations. By doing so, the firm won't reduce the price or increase the price. It will continue operating on the same price, but it will relocate by establishing itself in another country or in another location where it will be able to provide the same products. It can be at the same price, because in those locations where it's gone to or relocated to, those locations have got less competition or no competition at all. That is why we have terms like a monopoly at the end of the day. This is a market in which only one firm is able to set that price. And these are the advantages that will be realized at the end of the day when a firm decides to go international. Hence, it will reduce its competition and be able to compensate the competition that it experienced in the home country. That is a very positive thing for a firm that is experiencing competition. It does not need to reduce any price or increase its price. All it has to do is relocate to another area where there's less competition, and by doing so, it is going to gain global revenue. It is going to gain revenue that was not realized as before. Invest in a potentially rewarding relationship with foreign partners. Firms who decide to go international because they have seen that in that country where they can establish themselves, there are potential rewarding relationships, or there are good terms of businesses that they can have with partners. In such ventures, firms might engage into partnerships. They might engage into greenfield investments where they have to start, or they might venture into joint ventures where they have to make collaborations with already existing partners. Again, the example that I can give is the Chinese government. We have seen that the Chinese government has engaged itself with so many investments activities in Zambia. It's engaged itself in the construction works. It's engaged itself with so many business activities that at the end of the day, these activities are highly rewarding to them. These are the reasons why firms go international. Let's move on to our next slide. What are some examples, or what are the modes of international business? The modes of international business include import, exports. Foreign direct investments, licensing, franchising, mergers and acquisitions, tourism and transportations. These are some modes of international business. Import and export. Why do we say that imports and exports are a mode of international business? This is because in imports and exports, we see transactions that involve movement of goods and services from one country crossing a border into another country. That is exports and imports. Exporting, this is an activity that involves taking goods outside a domestic environment. And importing means taking goods and services from a foreign environment into the domestic environment. That is what we mean by exporting. And realize that at the end of the day, that makes an international transaction. It makes an international business because it involves crossing of borders. We go to our second point. Our second point is foreign direct investment. Investment means sacrificing for a present in order to attain future rewards. That is what we mean by investment. Foreign direct investments can occur or can be experienced into two modes. There is joint ventures where you invest in an already existing structure, or you can use greenfield investment where you have to start from scratch in establishing your business. Licensing. A company gives permission to another company to manufacture a product for a specified payment. You will be given a license to manufacture a given product for a specified payment. We see this activity happening a lot in our local shopping malls, for example. We see ShopRite, for example, engaging itself with other private entities that could have been businesses coming from abroad, businesses coming from domestic environments. And during that transaction, those people are given a license to produce a product and be able to sell in their existing firms at an agreed payment. Franchising. This happens when the franchisor sells their logo name to be used by an individual or company. For example, if at all I want to use a logo name for Nike or Adidas, that is going to involve me going into negotiation with the franchisor in order for me to get permission to use their logo name at an agreed amount of payment and in a given period of time. Mergers and acquisitions. Transactions in which the ownership of companies are transferred or consolidated with other entities. This is what we mean when we say mergers and acquisitions. Transactions in which ownership of companies are transferred or consolidated with other entities. You can be working as trade kings, for example, and there is another business operating in Zimbabwe. Trade kings might go into mergers and acquisitions by transferring their ownership to that other company that is operating in Zimbabwe. That is what we mean by mergers and acquisitions. And in this transaction, we see that it will be an international business at the end of the day because it involves a domestic company and a foreign company coming together into forming one entity at the end of the day. Tourism and transportation. We've got the Victoria Falls in Zambia, which attracts so many businessmen and businesswomen out there. People will travel from places as far as Europe just to come see the wonder of the Victoria Falls in Zambia. And in that movement, that will be an international business or transaction because that will involve movement of individuals from one country, which is the domestic country, to another country, which is a foreign country. These are some examples of modes of international business that we have, and we'll look into detail concerning them in the later units. A born global firm. A born global firm is a young entrepreneurial company that initiates international business activities very early in its evolution, moving rapidly into foreign markets. Born globals and SMEs. What are their characteristics? They are often more innovative, adaptive, and have quicker response times. They are better able to serve markets. They usually use leverage through the internet to do international business. Firms are born global. This is because they tend to minimize fixed costs and outsource limited resources in a domestic country. They tend to flourish on private knowledge that they cultivate via their knowledge networks. There are some risks that international businesses face. There are 4 types of risks that international businesses face. These are commercial risks, cross-cultural risks, currency risks, and country risks. excuse me. The four types of risks in international business. Cross-cultural risks. A situation or event where a cultural miscommunication puts some human value at stake. For example, in Zambia, we've got different cultures. In the Eastern, where I come from, the way we operate or the way I'll carry myself from the Eastern part of Zambia is going to be different to the way somebody will carry themselves from the northern or the southern part of Zambia. This is because these cultural differences exist. The way a home is going to welcome visitors, the way home A is going to welcome visitors is going to be different to the way home B is going to welcome visitors. This is because they have different cultural beliefs. This is because home A and home B have different cultural beliefs, and it becomes a risk at the end of the day for a business operating in Zambia, engaging itself with another country, for example, India. We see that these two countries have got two different cultural beliefs. What can be welcomed in Zambia might not be the same as it can be welcomed in India. Hence, it becomes a risk, and hence it becomes part of the risks of international business. The second risk is country risk. Potentially adverse effects on company operations and profitability caused by developments in the political, legal, and economic environment in a foreign country. We have seen up to this point that the political structure of a given country is going to determine how well a firm can operate in a domestic environment or a foreign environment. And this becomes a risk. For example, when Coca-Cola was abolished in India, this was as a result of the political regime that was being carried out during that period. Currency risk. Currency risk. This risk of adverse and unexpected fluctuations in the exchange rates. You can agree with me that in as much as you are doing business today, you might not be able to anticipate what the currency could be tomorrow. For example, when we look at the exchange rate of kwacha and dollar, that is an example of the currency risk that we can experience. Imagine if at all you invested largely in a currency that fluctuates randomly in a negative sense. As a business, you might lose out, and that at the end of the day might force your firm to collapse because that risk that you're experiencing is negatively affecting your business. Commercial risk. Firms' potential loss or failure from poorly developed or executed business strategies, tactics, or procedures. Firms' potential loss or failure from poorly developed or executed business strategies, tactics, or procedures. We see that commercial risk refers to the way a business is going to carry out its operations. Are the operations up to expectations? Are the operations made on the right time? Are the operations made within the required time interval? Is there accountability for any profits, losses? Is there accountability for any transaction that is carried out? These, at the end of the day, entails that the risk, the commercial risk, is resulted due to the operations that are being carried out within that firm. Risks are always present but manageable. Managers need to understand their implications, anticipate them, and take proactive actions to reduce adverse effects. Some risks are extremely challenging, e.g., the East Asian economic crisis of 1998 generated substantial commercial currency and country risk, political and social unrest surged to Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea, Thailand, and Philippines. You can read more on this in order to get full information concerning what truly happened in the East Asian economic crisis of 1998. Contributor to economic well-being. International trade is a critical engine for job creation. It is estimated that every $1 billion increase in exports creates more than 20,000 new jobs. International trade is critical engine for job creation. It is estimated that every $1 billion increase in exports creates more than 20,000 new jobs. And this is something very positive and something that can be welcomed by most governments if at all there is such a positive impact from exports. Not all countries are developed. Some countries are developing, others are developed, and others are underdeveloped. If at all the developed countries could be able to expand their exports to less developed or underdeveloped countries, we realize that in those areas, infrastructure will be improved, the road network system will be improved, jobs will be made available, and the goods and services that we are lacking before the introduction of those exports, we realize that those underdeveloped countries will be supplied with better services and goods. Point number 2, one of every $7 of USA sales is made abroad. Point number 3, international business is both a cause and a result of increasing national prosperity. Point number 4, prosperity is accompanied by literacy rate gains, nutrition and healthy care improvements, with some tendencies towards freedom and democracy. These are the 4 contributions that international business has on the national economic well-being. International business is an activity with societal implications. What are some of the implications that it can have on an economy? As firms increase their international activities, so does responsibility to society to be a good corporate citizens. Why do we have this point? We realize that in as much as firms go international, some activities that the firms can engage themselves might cause pollution to a given environment. That is why we see that this point concludes by saying that the society should become a good corporate citizen. In as much as the firm is operating, it should be observed that there is no negative adverse impact that is caused on a society that it is working in. Second point, large corporations like Walmart, Unilever, and Sony Liver have annual revenues larger than the GDPs of the nations they operate in. This is a positive impact because multinational companies on their own, not relying on the governments of given nations, they'll be able to provide jobs for local people, both local people and foreign citizens. The internationalization of thousands of firms negatively impacts the natural environment. This is the point I alluded earlier by saying that it will cause pollution to an environment where it is operating in. And as citizens, we need to cooperate and work together with firms to ensure that we are able to overcome the issue of pollution. Large banks and international investment brokers have disrupted the economies of nations with aggressive currency trading or by manipulating stock markets. Some multinational enterprises ignore human rights and basic labor standards by establishing factories in countries that pay low wages with substandard working conditions, e.g. like in Asia. Building factories abroad often leads to job losses at home. We can conclude by saying that international businesses provide both positive and negative impacts on an environment. We are going to meet again in our next lecture. That will be on